A recent instance made me think a lot about how to shape the strategy of a company in an evolving and a dynamic scenario. So, what I saw was there was this factory which was which required a steady requirement of water. Now, in the summer months, the requirement of water was not being fulfilled. As a result of it, this factory used to run dry, and for around 1.5 months there was no water, and the factory never worked. There was a river which used to go from around 4 kilometers far away from the factory, and in between there were these lots of fields of agricultural fields which were around. Now, this river was perennial in nature, so it had water in it. So what needed to be done was something very simple, was to make a canal from the factory till the river so that water can come in and adequate amount of water would be available in the summer months as well. From these canals, feeders could be given to the nearby farmlands, so therefore more crops could also be developed here. The large scale concept was very simple. But what actually happened was that to make this small little thing happen, it took 4 years. But yes, the good thing is that it happened. It's not about India, it's not about the regulatory processes, it's not about that. It's about something far more important and significant, which is how does someone analyze a dynamic and evolving scenario. When I look back and I sat with the teams which have done this complete work, what I realize is that the way you handle strategy or the way one handles problem solving tools, so you might have 7 problem solving tools, you might have the root cause analysis. All of these techniques are functioning in a domain of certainty in the environment. Where one can analyze a man-machine method and measure concepts. Whereas in this particular case, what really happened was that every bit of it was dynamic. So, number one, from the org factory, the person who was responsible for making that happen changed 4 times. The nearby fields were owned by farmers, and these farmers, they kept on changing their requirement and compensation several times based on inputs given by whoever knew about it. The river was flowing across states, so therefore there were multiple officers who were required, and the officers kept changing. And with the change of the officers, the perspectives kept changing. All of this, to get all of this together in a particular direction, that took a huge amount of time. Though the actual work, if you say, here, the work was just about a 6 to 8 months work to construct the canal and get the water in, make some check dams in the process. Now, the inability of managers to understand the dynamic and ever evolving scenario gives rise to a lot of complexities. So what all should a manager analyze, or anyone who's dealing with this particular scenario, what all should he analyze? First and foremost, he should be able to understand the elements which are involved. Who all are there? There is river, there is water, there's a farmer, there's a canal, there's a factory, there's a government. He should be very clear of what are the elements. He should know how do these elements interact with each other. What are the NGOs or the other forces which can significantly influence this interaction with each other? How strong are the influences, which I mentioned were the NGOs and the other forces? How strong are they? And in this whole equation, who wins and who loses? Remember, while we talk of win-win everywhere, it doesn't happen this way. There will be someone who's winning and there will always be someone who's losing. For example, in this river case, obviously when the water is tapped off from this point, obviously further down there is a reduction in flow. So there will be someone who will lose in the process. So if there is a power plant, a hydel power plant further down, obviously the hydel power plant reservoirs might have to be made a little more deeper to hold for this, to compensate for this reduction in the flow. Maybe check dams need to be built further down so that there can be some more water going into the water table when there is excess flow into the river during the monsoon season. So how do you work around this? As a manager, what I realize is that over time, more and more of these dynamic and evolving scenarios will be coming to you. It's very important to be able to analyze these in totality and to be able to take them in your stride and work with them. I've seen many managers give up because they are unable to analyze this very well. So what are the steps? So how do you go about this, and how do you make a strategy in this scenario? So while it's still a strategy job, but the complexity in the strategy making, due to the uncertainty, due to the various other evolving forces, increases substantially. So what are these toeholds that you need to have when you are trying to make the strategy? First is that understand the scenario completely. I've seen very often people get into action without understanding the scenario completely. They don't understand who are the people, who are the influencers, who is the middleman. Does the middleman has more strength? Does the end farmer has more strength? What can be the various ways in which these middlemen react? Next, you need to be able to use time judiciously. You should know as a manager in this space as to when you're pacing with time, when do you accelerate and when do you deliberately delay. So time should be in your control, and what is the scenario about, when are the factors favorable, therefore when should you pursue this particular approach. Use time judiciously in this whole process. Use time as a strategy. It's not about just setting a timeline and a goal, but it's about using it strategically. Weighing people, their perspectives, and how are they going to react in different scenarios. So if scenario A plays out, how will they react? If the scenario B plays out, how will these people react? You should be very clear on weighing the people perspectives and the prejudices, who's going to come where, who's going to play along, who's going to oppose, why would he oppose, every bit of it. Now that you know these three building blocks, which are the first three bit of it, you have to weave a fabric. I would say that these three are the strings and you need to weave a fabric out of it, which is your story. You need to understand that this is the way. You need to process this information and you need to say that this is the way this whole thing is going to pan out. If this is the way this whole thing is going to pan out, this is my story, this is my take, this is how I am going to navigate this maze, and so that my objective is being met, or at the same time there is no opposition from others. So the work is done. If the work is not done, ultimately no one wins or nothing happens. And next is work towards the direction. Now, if you follow these 5 steps, it becomes very simple for you to figure out how are you going to navigate this particular space. Is it an easy space to navigate? Of course not. Nothing is easy. When you're looking at a strategy which is ever evolving, dynamic, there are interplays, where is the money going, who's taking the money, what is the value chain all about, who wins, who loses, what is the perspective of the people in power, if the people change, what are their perspectives, who are the new guys who come in. All of this becomes very important. So whenever you are making a strategy, you know that your strategy is going to encounter a dynamic and evolving scenario, be very sure that you follow these 5 steps and stay course. Use time to your advantage, understand the scenario completely, understand the people completely, and the trick is in weaving the right story. Others also facing the similar scenario, they might know the strings right, but how do they weave the fabric right is where the difference is. So it's not only about data, it's about a lot of intuitive thinking, and it's about a lot of a chess playing kind of a scenario. So you have to understand how these 4 or 5, like in a game of chess there are 1 or 2 opponents. In this case you might have 3 forces supporting you, 2 opposing you, but the 2 who are opposing you might be the stronger ones. So you need to figure out ways to weaken those or get them to your side before you take your next steps. Organizations which have got these wrong have always had an instance of what we call stalled projects. Whenever you see a scenario where there's a project which has got stalled or midway or halted and all, typically it's a case where an organization has not been able to analyze this scenario well, and they have not been able to weave the right story, and they then end up going into a litigation and to the court and to the police force, and then the NGOs come in, and then the global reporting happens about this, and it's a big mess. The thing is that you have to learn to work around it. You have to learn to understand a dynamic and evolving scenario, and you should be able to navigate this maze through using the story that you have been able to weave successfully. Over time, my take is that this is going to become more and more required, and so it's important as effective managers to be having a sound